FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.
And welcome. You're listening to the Financial Survival Network, and we're really pleased that we managed to get hold of Jim Rogers from the other side of the world in Singapore. You know him well, no doubt, and so many books, so much experience in the financial system, clearly a unique perspective. His latest book, Street Smarts, and I've read it, and just delightful book, entertaining, and you learn something from it. And what more can you ask from a book than that? Jim, hope you're doing well. What can you tell us about what the heck is going on in the world now? It seems like things have kind of gone upside down recently.
Upside down. I hope it's only upside down. I'm afraid it's going to be worse than that. You know, this is the first time in recorded history you've had all the major central banks in the world printing money, huge amounts of money at the same time. We've got this gigantic artificial ocean of liquidity floating around, and it's going to end someday, Kerry. And when it does, all of us are going to be sorry, and we're all going to suffer.
Mm-hmm. And the artificial wave of liquidity, basically, it's got to come to an end. But nobody wants to pull the plug. Nobody wants to be the first to do it. Somebody's going to be forced to do it, aren't they? And there's going to be an event, I guess. We all know an event is going to happen. We don't know what this event's going to be, but it's going to happen, isn't it?
Well, it's very unlikely that central bankers are going to come to their senses. Let's just suppose for the minute that a miracle happens. And so one of them says, okay, guys, we got to stop this. What will happen is that somewhere along after that, markets will start reacting badly. And then they'll all call the central bank and say, oh my gosh, you're killing us. You're ruining Western civilization. You're ruining the world. The central banks are made up of bureaucrats and academics who don't know any better. They've never had a job, never been in the markets. They will give up. They will panic and they will say, we're sorry. We'll come to your rescue. Then we'll have another rally. That may be the last one because eventually, Kerry, your scenario is right. The market's just going to say, we don't want this garbage anymore. This is insane. This is absurd. And then we're going to have an event, a serious event. And/or, I guess the third possibility is that we have some kind of foolishness like a war or something that nobody expects, and that could be the event which precipitates it. First of all, I hope it doesn't happen because war is never good. But second, if it does happen that way, the central bankers will say, wasn't our fault. We didn't have anything to do with the problem.
Yeah. And so we almost had that. Maybe the Swiss central bankers were coming to their senses when they broke the peg to the euro. Was that possibly what was happening, or were they just forced into it?
No, they were forced into it. They would still be doing it if they weren't running out of money and seeing exactly what was happening. I mean, the balance sheet was almost the size of the Swiss, GDP. No, they were forced into it as they had to be. I wrote it in my book, the book you mentioned, Street Smarts. I explained this was all going to happen. This was going to fail.
Right.
Of course, they didn't listen. Nobody listens when you explain there's a problem coming.
Yeah, and then you have companies like Nestle's and their pharmaceutical companies like Ciba Geigy and all of their pharmaceuticals say, we can't afford to stay in Switzerland because the franc is so high, we can't compete. We're going to move. And that scares the political leadership to death because that's jobs and the political price of a strong franc. How can they live with that?
Well, that plus tourists, of course. The tourists said we're going to go skiing in Austria instead of Switzerland. We can't afford Switzerland. No, you're exactly right. Everybody was wailing. Nobody mentioned the fact that your standard of living goes up when your currency goes up because everything you import is cheaper and that you live a better life. All the inhabitants of Switzerland live a better life. Those people don't say anything if they're not thinking about it. They're not out in the streets protesting. It's the people who are armed who are out in the streets protesting. The rest of the people are just going to work, having a good time and living a better life.
Is that what's happening in the U.S. now? Are we living a better life now that the dollar is going up against the euro? We can get cheaper Mercedes-Benzes and Volkswagens and and cheaper Bordeaux?
Well, yes and no. That is one of the effects, and that's one reason people think they're fat and happy, because some prices are coming down. However, it's being built on the basis of printed money and massive debt. Never in world history has a country come to build prosperity by debasing its currency and by running up debt. Sure, you can for a while. The people are getting the money, are very happy. They're pleased. They go to work every day making more and more money, and their friends are happy. But it has always failed in the end. It has always failed in the end, Kerry.
And so New York City is an island of illusion and an island of debt, right?
Not just New York City as a whole. Get out your map. There are 50 states. There are 50 states. Some are better off than others, but New York City is certainly the epicenter and Washington of the illusion, yes.
Yeah, it's an illusion. And at some point, we're all going to wake up and find not just the emperor, but the rest of us have got clothes that we bought on our credit card that are going to be repossessed effectively, and we'll have no clothes.
We're going to have no clothes. We're going to have very little food, and I'm not sure we're going to be able to afford the Bordeaux or the Mercedes-Benz.
Yeah, or if we own it free and clear, there's going to be a lot of people that want to take it away.
Well, there's no question about that. And even if you say you own your house free and clear, that's fine and dandy, but all your neighbors are going to be forced to sell their houses. So your house is going to go down in value, and who knows, you might even lose your house if you had to dump it.
Right. So is there anything that Joe Sixpack can do to try to insulate himself, or at least cushion the blow of what you and I both know is coming here, Jim?
Well, everybody, including Joe Sixpack, should just invest in what they know. They shouldn't listen to me or anybody else on the internet or the TV or the newspaper. They should stay with what they know. I mean, maybe they should listen to you, Kerry, but that even is probably dangerous if they don't know what you're talking about. If people go out and blindly invest in something, they're going to suffer. So stay with what you know is my only commandment. Figure out what you know and then figure out ways to invest or to protect yourself. I mean, there are things that I suggest, like farmland or real assets, et cetera, or having some of your money outside of your home country, whatever your home country is. But none of these things should anybody do if they don't know what they're talking about. If you don't know where Canada is on a map, you shouldn't think about investing in Canada, et cetera. So stay with what you know first. There are ways to protect yourself. And if you don't know about real assets, for instance, you can learn about it. If you don't know about international diversification, you can learn about it. But don't do anything until you know what you're doing.
Now, when you talk about international diversification, what countries out there are safe for freedom-loving people these days? Freedom seems to be the most scarcest of commodities in this day and age, Jim, and a quickly vanishing commodity.
Well, there's no such thing as safe when you're talking about freedom, because everybody wants to take it away. You know, I'm not the first to know that power corrupts, and it always corrupts. No question about that. As far as countries, though, some countries are better places to be than others. As you well know, in the United States, we just how much of our constitutional freedoms, guarantees even, have been taken away, and it's getting worse. But as I look around the world, and Kerry, I do this all the time because I worry about the same thing you do, and
Absolutely.
It's hard to find a place. Now, I live in Singapore, and Singapore has an authoritarian streak, but at least it's less authoritarian than many other countries, and it's a very efficient and delightful place to live. I look at countries. I see countries opening up. I see Myanmar opening up from a terrible dictatorship for many decades. I see North Korea opening up. But if I said to everybody, go to North Korea because that's where you're going to be safe, you'd all hang up the phone and say, what's wrong with this guy? But the way you do succeed at anything is you look at a desperate situation, especially one that's cheap or that's repressive, say, it's opening up. It's hard to do. It's like buying a stock that's cheap. Nobody wants it when it's cheap, but that's the best way to capitalize. You know, if you look at Asia, for instance, 50 years ago, South Korea, Taiwan, Singapore, Japan, all of these were one-party states that were very, very repressive. Now they're all vibrant, successful democracies. So if one had gone to some of those places 50 years ago, and I certainly did not, but if one had, you'd be living a lot freer and a lot more prosperous than before. But it's hard to do, Kerry. It's extremely hard. It's just like buying low. It's very hard to do.
I think that's such a great point that you make here, Jim, is you got to somehow look ahead of the trend and get ahead of it And freedom is just another trend, right? When you get down to it, when you go back to the founding of the United States, that was a trend in freedom, and it lasted a long time. Perhaps the trend's reversed, or perhaps the trend has slightly reversed temporarily, and it's going to come back stronger than ever. We don't really know that at this point, do we?
Well, usually what happens when you have economic problems or collapse of any kind is a man on a white horse, a strong man on a white horse comes along and says, "Don't worry, I'll save you, I'll save you." And everybody says, "That's wonderful, do it, do it, do it." He does. It becomes worse as he becomes more repressive. And then people realize, oh my gosh, this is even worse. But those kind of things take a while. It's unfortunate, but they do take a while. No, Kerry, even when the United States started, most people in the world didn't pay any attention or thought it was a joke. Well, we know it turned out to be the most successful country in the world in the 20th century, but it was certainly a joke for a long time.
Yeah, great point. And that's, you have to take every trend seriously, look at it. Some you have to take more seriously than others, right?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Most things don't work out in the end. That's why it's so hard to be successful at anything.
Right. And so if you were put your hat on from way back when the United States is founded as a free country, the whole world is kind of shaking their heads and thinking this thing is never going to last. You're looking at it and saying, because you're a contrarian investor, and you're saying, wait a second, I think these guys over in the colonies are onto something. How would you have known? How could you have foretold that these founding fathers really knew what they were doing?
Well, I wish I could have told you. I would have foreseen it. But I would remind you, Kerry, too, that the U.S. was not so free for a long time. Very, very few people could vote. Very few could vote. We had many, many repressive laws.
Oh, yeah.
We had 15 depressions. We had a horrible civil war. We had massacres in the streets. We had a lot of serious, serious problems as we evolved and became the most successful and probably the freest country, certainly, maybe not in history, but certainly in the world. But there were a lot of problems along the way. We didn't just wake up in 1800 and say, well, here we are, we've done it. They just passed the Alien and Sedition Acts, in fact. There were all sorts of repressive laws passed in those days. And again, very few people could vote even in those days. If you were white and you were a landowner, you could vote. But if you were female, you couldn't do anything. And if God knows, if you were a foreigner, it was very difficult to do anything in those days. We didn't particularly like foreigners many times in our history. But anyway, I don't know how I would have seen it. I hope I could have had enough sense to say, maybe just by looking around the world and saying, okay, every place else is going down the tubes, so the U.S. got to be a great place to be. Maybe I would have seen that Great Britain was on the rise and was going to be very successful in the 19th century. I don't know. I hope I would have been perceptive enough, if nothing else by comparison, to head to the U.S.
Yeah.
Just like now, we're all looking for the place to go, and it's hard to find. I mean, there are great changes taking place in some countries. Colombia, for instance, is opening up dramatically after a multi-decade civil war. So, I mean, the problem is, Kerry, you and I and everybody else has to figure out where and what. Not easy.
So Chile, we look at Chile, that's been a remarkably successful experiment. Yeah, problems with freedom, oppressive military, separation between state and military rule, problems there. But overall, you look at the success story there, and then you wonder, but can it continue? There's some alarming trends there. Is it worth rolling the dice there? You have to wonder.
Well, is it worth rolling the dice anywhere? We do know, or at least I think I perceive, that the U.S. is in decline, or at least relative decline, economically and as far as freedom is concerned. There may be people who would disagree with that. I'm sure Barack Obama would disagree with that. He's part of the cause of the problems that I perceive. Everybody has to make their own judgment. And as I say, it's not easy. I see some places that are getting better, I think. But I've made plenty of mistakes in my life, Kerry. Let me tell you about my first wife. I know how to make mistakes.
Join the club. I mean, that makes for a richer life. I mean, you don't learn from the things you do right. You learn from the things you do wrong, at least for me, right?
And most successes are dangerous. They're not learning experiences. They make you cocky. They make you think you know what you're doing. Yeah. You don't stop and examine it very carefully like you do your mistakes. Or at least I don't.
Yeah, that's always been the case for me. The source of my biggest mistakes have been my greatest successes, and I don't think that's going to change any. And so part of it is you wind up, you have a family, and that can really make it more difficult, make you less flexible to actually be able to move to other parts of the world. Although for some, maybe it make you more anxious to find that bastion of freedom. You're a single person. You're 20-something now. You've got the education. Where do you go?
Well, if I were 20-something and single, I would head straight to Asia. The 21st century is going. The 19th century was the century of the UK. 20th century was the century of the US. Well, the 21st century will be the century of Asia. There's certainly opportunities here. I mean, conceivably Africa, conceivably South America, but the wind is going to be at your back more in Asia than other places. The richest countries in the world now, the ones with the highest foreign currency reserves are China, Korea, Taiwan, Japan, Singapore, Hong Kong. I mean, this is where the assets are. This is where people will still work hard and save and invest for the future, as opposed to some of the other places we know. The U.S. is the largest debtor nation in world history, and the debt is going higher and higher. You know what's happening in Europe. They talk about austerity, but every one of those countries has higher debt every year, despite all the talk. So, I mean, the facts are pretty clear. These things have happened throughout history. They always come out the same way in the end. You and I were talking earlier about we know this is all going to end badly someday. Well, I'd rather be in a place where the creditors with huge assets and a strong work ethic than in places with big debts and no work ethic.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. Willie Sutton, go where the money is. I mean, he didn't say that, but it is a great saying anyway. Anyway, Jim, I guess we buy your book at Amazon. Best place to get it. It is a great book. I really enjoyed it. Website, active website now?
Well, I have a website, but it's really just a documentation of my trip around the world, my last trip around the world. There are my public speaking schedules there, but there's not much there other than if you want to go and see what the world was like at the turn of the millennium, you can go there. But or you want to see my public schedule, but that's about all. The book's available anywhere. You know how to buy books. Everybody knows how to buy books.
We figured that one out, although I don't know how many people still read them. But buy it at Amazon, download it for the Kindle. That's what I did. Instant gratification, something Americans are still good at and probably always will be. Anyway, Jim, as always, thanks so much for coming on. And it's getting interesting, huh?
It is. You know, be careful, be worried, be prepared.
Yeah, always.
Interesting times this decade.
Oh,
Thanks,
yeah.
Kerry. Let's do it again someday.
Oh, yeah, we will. Thanks so much, Jim.
Bye-bye.
FSN Radio. It's all about what's next. Go to financialsurvivalnetwork.com and sign up for your free weekly newsletter. You'll also get 3 free reports. The Financial Survival Network. It's all about what's next.